The message was only 3 words long. Help, he's coming. The terrified single mom stared at her phone, hands trembling. She hadn't slept in 48 hours. Her daughter was hiding in the closet again, silent, trained by fear. Her ex was on his way, threatening to take Sophia, threatening worse. She meant to text the domestic violence hotline. Instead, she sent the message to the wrong number. She didn't know it belonged to the most feared mafia boss in the city. Minutes passed, no reply. She choked back a sob and started barricading the door with furniture. Then her phone buzzed. Where are you? The reply read. She froze. This couldn't be real. She typed back, shaking. I'm sorry. Wrong number. Please ignore. Another message came instantly. Send the address, now. Across town, the mafia boss stood abruptly from his meeting. Something about those 3 words, the raw terror, the urgency, hit him like a punch to the chest. Too familiar. He grabbed his coat and barked at his men. We move, now, because that night, a single text, sent by mistake, was about to collide 2 desperate worlds. Stay with me until the end, because what happens when his men arrive at her door will prove that sometimes the most dangerous protectors are exactly what you need. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Elena Moretti had been staring at the restraining order for 20 minutes, but the words had stopped making sense an hour ago. Stay at least 500 feet away from the protected person. The paper felt like a sick joke. Derek had never cared about laws, boundaries, or consequences. Why would a judge's signature change that now? Her apartment was a contradiction of desperation and hope. Packed duffel bag sat by the door, ready for an escape she'd been planning for 3 weeks but couldn't afford to execute. A stack of job applications covered the kitchen table, most already rejected. Sophia's toys were scattered across the worn carpet, bright spots of color in a space that felt like it was closing in. The leash she could barely afford. The locks that weren't strong enough. The windows that faced the fire escape Derek knew how to climb. Mommy, look! Sophia held up a crayon drawing, 4 years old, and blissfully unaware that her mother had been teaching her to hide in the closet and stay quiet. It's us and a puppy. Elena forced a smile that felt like shattered glass. It's beautiful, baby. Her voice cracked on the last word. She'd promised Sophia a puppy once. Back when she still believed Derek's apologies. Back when she thought love was supposed to hurt a little. Her phone buzzed. Then again. And again. Elena's stomach dropped before she even looked at the screen. She knew that pattern. 3 texts, in rapid succession. Derek's signature move when he was working himself up to something. I know you're there. You can't hide from me. I'm coming for what's mine. Her hands started shaking. Not the small tremor of nervousness, but the full-body recognition of danger that every abuse survivor learns to read like a second language. She'd seen this escalation before. Felt it in the changing rhythm of his messages. The shortening time between contacts. He was getting closer, physically and mentally, to doing something irreversible. Sophia looked up from her drawing. Mommy, you okay? Yes, sweetie. Keep coloring. Elena turned away so her daughter wouldn't see the fear. She'd gotten good at hiding it, at pretending everything was fine while her world crumbled in real time. Another buzz, a photo this time. The entrance to her building, taken from across the street, taken maybe 10 minutes ago. See you soon. Elena's breath caught in her chest. He was here, or had been, maybe still was, circling the block, working up his nerve, deciding how much damage he wanted to do tonight. The restraining order hadn't even slowed him down. The police had told her to call if he violated it, as if a phone call could stop a man who'd already proven he didn't care about consequences. Her fingers fumbled through her purse, searching for the card the domestic violence advocate had given her 3 months ago. The hotline number. The one she'd been too proud, too ashamed, too convinced she could handle things herself to call. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. The card wasn't there. Elena dumped her purse contents onto the table. Receipts, loose change, Sophia's hair ties, everything except what she needed. She'd had it yesterday. She knew she had. Unless Derek had taken it during his last visit. The one where he'd somehow gotten her spare key and let himself in while she was at the grocery store. The one where she'd come home to find him sitting on her couch like he still lived there, like he still owned her. Panic was setting in now. The kind that made her hands shake harder and her thoughts scatter. She grabbed her phone, searched frantically for the hotline number. Found it. Started typing it in. Her vision blurred with tears she couldn't afford to shed because Sophia was watching, and children absorbed fear like sponges. 555-0147. She typed it carefully. Double-checked it, except her hands were shaking so badly that she didn't notice she'd transposed the last 2 digits. 555-0174. Wrong number. Wrong person, wrong universe than the one where help came when you needed it. He's coming. Please. I need help now. She hit send and immediately felt the familiar shame of asking, of admitting she couldn't handle this alone, of proving Derek right when he said she was weak and useless without him. 5 minutes passed. Sophia hummed to herself, coloring her puppy brown with careful strokes. Elena watched her phone screen, like it might spontaneously combust. No reply. Of course no reply. Even the hotline didn't want to deal with her mess. She started typing an apology, fingers trembling over the keys. Then her phone buzzed. Where are you? Elena stared at the message. 2 words. No judgment. No questions about whether she'd really tried leaving. No suggestions that maybe she was overreacting. Just immediate, direct action. This had to be wrong. Had to be a scam or someone who'd think she was crazy when she explained. Her fingers shook harder as she typed back. I'm sorry. Wrong number. Please ignore. The reply came in seconds. Send the address. Now. There was something in those words. Something that wasn't quite compassion but felt like it. Something hard and sharp and uncompromising that reminded her of power. Of someone who didn't ask twice and didn't need explanations. Exactly the kind of voice that terrified her after years with Derek. But Derek's power had always been about control. This felt different. This felt like protection. Before she could type a response, another message. Are you in immediate danger? Elena's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. Yes. The answer was yes. Derek's last text had been 8 minutes ago. If he was coming, he'd be here soon. The building's security door had been broken for 2 months. The landlord kept promising to fix it. Her fingers moved almost without conscious thought. 347 Riverside Apartments. 3B. My ex is coming. He has a key. I have a restraining order, but... She stopped typing. This person didn't need her life story. They needed facts. He's dangerous. I have a 4-year-old daughter. The reply was instantaneous. Lock your door. Move furniture in front of it. We're coming. We're. Not I'm. We're. Multiple people mobilizing for a stranger's text message. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of setup. Or a cruel joke. Or worse. Another message. 10 minutes. Stay away from windows. Elena stood frozen, phone in hand, unable to process what was happening. Someone was coming. Multiple someones. In 10 minutes. Because she'd sent a desperate text to a wrong number. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous. That she was jumping from one threat into another. That men who mobilized that fast for strangers had their own agendas. But what choice did she have? Wait for Derek. Call the police again, so they could show up an hour after he'd already broken down her door. Hide in the closet with Sophia and hope he didn't find them this time? She looked at her daughter, still coloring, still safe in her bubble of childhood ignorance. Whatever was coming in 10 minutes couldn't be worse than what was already on its way. Elena grabbed her heavy bookshelf and started dragging it toward the door. The wood scraped against the floor with a sound that made Sophia look up. Mommy, what are you doing? Just moving some furniture, baby. Keep coloring. She'd just gotten the bookshelf in place when she heard it. Heavy footsteps in the hallway. Deliberate. Angry. Coming closer. Derek's voice, loud enough to carry through the thin walls. Elena, open the door. I know you're in there. Her blood turned to ice. He was here. The mysterious help was still minutes away. And she was alone with a 4-year-old and a bookshelf that suddenly felt pathetically inadequate. The footsteps stopped outside her door. Marco Valentino didn't react to interruptions during business meetings. In his world, interruptions meant weakness, distraction, vulnerability. The men sitting around his table knew this. They'd learned to silence their phones, to focus completely, to treat his time like the valuable commodity it was. So when his private phone buzzed in his jacket pocket, every head in the room turned. Marco pulled it out slowly, jaw tightening as he read the message. Help. He's coming. Please. I need help now. His blood went cold. That phone was for emergencies only. His inner circle, his most trusted people. If someone was sending that message, they were in immediate, life-threatening danger. Who is it? Dominic, his second in command, leaned forward. One of ours? Marco didn't recognize the number. But that didn't matter. Someone had this number. Someone needed help. Now. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against hardwood. We move. Dominic, take 3 cars. Carlo, I want our best. Armed but concealed. Boss, we don't even know. Now. The single word cut through the room like a blade. Marco was already moving toward the door, pulling up the message again, fingers flying across the screen. Where are you? The room erupted into controlled chaos. Men reaching for phones, for weapons hidden in shoulder holsters and ankle straps. This was what they did. What they'd been trained for. Someone signals distress, everyone responds. No questions until after the threat is neutralized. A reply came through. I'm sorry. Wrong number. Please ignore. Wrong number. Marco stopped in the hallway, staring at his phone. Wrong number. But the desperation in that first message had been real. The terror had been real. He'd learned to read fear in text messages the same way other men read stock tickers. This wasn't a prank or a mistake. This was someone in genuine danger, reaching out to whoever they thought could help. He typed back, send the address, now. Behind him, Dominic was already coordinating. 3 SUVs, full tactical gear in the trunks. I want eyes on the location before we enter. Marco's phone buzzed again. His chest tightened as he read. 347 Riverside Apartments. 3B. My ex is coming. He has a key. I have a restraining order but, then, he's dangerous. I have a 4-year-old daughter. The words hit Marco like a physical blow. His mother. His father breaking down their door when Marco was 12. His sister screaming from her bedroom. The sound of fists hitting flesh, over and over, while 12-year-old Marco had hidden in a closet, too terrified to move, too small to fight back. His hands were shaking. Marco Valentino's hands never shook. Boss? Dominic's voice pulled him back. What's the situation? Domestic. Woman with a child. Ex-partner on the way. Marco's voice was steel wrapped in ice. I want her protected. I want him stopped. Non-negotiable. Something in his tone made Dominic nod, without argument. They'd worked together for 15 years. Dominic had seen Marco face down rival families, police raids, near-death situations, without flinching. He'd never seen his boss's hands shake. Marco typed rapidly. Lock your door. Move furniture in front of it. We're coming. Then, 10 minutes. Stay away from windows. Move faster. He barked at his men. We have 10 minutes to get across town. A child's life is at stake. Elena had the bookshelf against the door when Derek's voice echoed through the hallway. Elena, open the door. I know you're in there. Her whole body went rigid. She looked at Sophia, still coloring, still innocent, still unaware that the monster from her nightmares was standing just outside their door. Sweetie, Elena whispered, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. Remember our game? The quiet game in the closet? Sophia's eyes went wide. She'd practiced this drill enough times to know what it meant. She dropped her crayons and ran to her mother without a word. Good girl. Such a good, terrified girl, who'd learned survival skills at 4 years old. Elena scooped her up, carried her to the bedroom closet, and set her down among the winter coats and boxes. Stay quiet, baby, no matter what you hear. Can you do that for mommy? Sophia nodded, tears already streaming down her cheeks. The doorknob rattled. Derek was trying his key. Elena's heart nearly stopped. She'd changed the locks 3 weeks ago. He shouldn't be able to. The lock clicked. He had a new key. Of course he did. Derek always found a way. The door hit the bookshelf with a heavy thud. What the hell? Derek's voice was right there, inches away, separated only by wood and Elena's hastily constructed barricade. You changed the locks. You think that's gonna stop me? He slammed against the door again. The bookshelf shifted, sliding backward across the floor. Elena grabbed it, throwing her weight against it, but she was 120 pounds, and Derek was 210. The physics weren't in her favor. They never had been. Elena, his voice was rising, the familiar escalation that always preceded violence. Open this door right now, or I swear to God. Another slam. The bookshelf moved 6 inches. One more hit, and he'd be through. Then Elena heard it. New sounds in the hallway. Multiple footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, moving fast. Derek heard them too. He stopped pushing. What the? Derek's voice changed. The aggressive confidence drained out of it, replaced by confusion, and something that might have been fear. A new voice, deep and commanding. Step away from the door. Who the hell are you? Derek tried to sound tough, but Elena could hear the tremor underneath. She knew that sound. She'd heard it before. The rare times Derek had been confronted by someone bigger, stronger, more dangerous than himself. I said step away from the door. The voice didn't rise in volume, but something in it made Elena's skin prickle. This was a man used to being obeyed. Immediately. This is none of your business. That's my girlfriend in there. And the sound of flesh hitting wall cut Derek off mid-sentence. A heavy thud. Then Derek's voice, smaller now. Jesus Christ, okay. A knock. 3 sharp raps. Professional. Controlled. Ma'am, are you safe? Elena stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Men were here. Multiple men. They'd just physically moved Derek away from her door. In under 10 minutes, just like they'd promised. "Ma'am, we're here to help. Can you open the door?" Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely move the bookshelf. She pulled it aside, inch by inch, then reached for the locks with trembling fingers. 3 deadbolts. A chain. Security measures that had meant nothing. When Derek had a key, she opened the door a crack, chain still engaged, and found herself staring at 3 men in dark suits. Professional. Dangerous looking. The kind of men who made people cross to the other side of the street. The one in front had kind eyes that didn't match his intimidating frame. "Are you Elena?" She nodded, unable to speak. "Is there a child in the apartment?" Another nod. Her throat had closed completely. "You're safe now. We're not going to let anyone hurt you or your daughter." He said it with such absolute certainty that Elena almost believed him. Almost. Behind them, Derek was pressed against the hallway wall by another suited man, his face pale, his earlier bravado completely gone. "Who?" Elena's voice came out as a whisper. "Who are you?" Before the man could answer, the elevator dinged. New footsteps, slower this time, measured. When the man stepped into view, Elena's breath caught. He was maybe 45, wearing a coat that probably cost more than her car. Dark hair touched with gray at the temples. Eyes that had seen too much and calculated everything. He looked at Derek with an expression of such cold contempt that even Elena felt it from 10 feet away. Then he turned to her, and something in his face shifted. Softened, just fractionally. "I'm Marco," he said quietly. "You sent me a message." Elena stared at him. At the expensive clothes. At the way his men stood at attention. At Derek, still pinned to the wall, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. "I texted the wrong number," she whispered. Marco's eyes held hers. "No. You didn't." Marco stepped into Elena's apartment, like he owned it, his eyes scanning every detail with practiced efficiency. The packed bags by the door. The restraining order on the table. The child's toys scattered across the floor, next to evidence of a life barely held together. He'd seen this before. Different address, same desperation. "Dominic," he said without turning around. "Get him out of my sight." "You can't just," Derek started, trying to reclaim some authority. The man holding him against the wall tightened his grip, and Derek's protest died in his throat. "Actually, I can." Marco's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. "You have 2 choices. Walk away now, and never come back. Or find out exactly how creative I can be when someone threatens a woman and child." Derek looked at Elena, his face twisting with familiar rage. "You called the mob. Are you insane? When the police find out." "The police?" Marco smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression Elena had ever seen. "The same police who gave her a restraining order that you violated in less than a week. The same police who told her to call if she felt threatened, then showed up 2 hours after the fact." He took a step toward Derek. "I don't wait 2 hours. Boss," Dominic warned quietly. "Not here." Marco stopped, but Elena could see the effort it took. Something in the way Derek cowered, the way he'd been trying to break down her door minutes ago, had triggered something visceral in Marco. This wasn't professional anymore. This was personal. "Get him out," Marco repeated. "And make sure he understands what happens if he comes back." Dominic nodded, already dragging Derek toward the elevator. 2 other men followed, their presence making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Derek tried once more to meet Elena's eyes, to reclaim the power he'd always had over her, but she looked away. For the first time in 4 years, she looked away first. The apartment felt larger without Derek's presence poisoning the air. Elena stood frozen, still gripping the doorframe, unable to process what had just happened. A stranger had mobilized an army for her wrong number text, had physically removed the threat she'd been living with for months, had done in 10 minutes what the legal system couldn't do in a year. "You're shaking," Marco observed. Not judgment, just fact. Elena looked down at her hands. He was right. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her trembling and unsteady. I don't understand what just happened. You asked for help. I provided it. But you don't know me. I texted the wrong number. You should have just ignored it." Marco moved to her small kitchen table, pulled out a chair, and gestured for her to sit. Elena found herself obeying, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. He sat across from her, maintaining careful distance, making himself smaller and less threatening despite the power that radiated from him. "When I was 12 years old," Marco said quietly, "my father broke down our door in the middle of the night. He'd been drinking. My mother had a restraining order too." He paused, his jaw tightening. "It was just a piece of paper. Like yours." Elena's breath caught. She heard the weight in those words, the history that matched her own terror. "I hid in a closet, while he beat her unconscious. My little sister was screaming. I was too scared to move, too small to fight back. Marco's eyes were distant, seeing a different hallway, a different door being broken down. When the police finally came, they arrested him, gave my mother another restraining order. He was back 3 weeks later. What happened? Elena whispered. He killed her. The words were flat, emotionless, but Elena could see the pain underneath. Decades old, and still raw. I was 12. My sister was 7. And I swore that day that if I ever had the power to stop men like him, I would. No hesitation, no excuses. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. For herself, for Marco's mother, for every woman who'd ever been told a piece of paper would protect her from a man determined to hurt her. I built everything I have on that promise, Marco continued. Some of it legal, some of it not. I'm not a good man, Elena. I've done things that would horrify you. But I do not tolerate men who hurt women and children. Ever. A small sound from the bedroom made them both turn. Sophia stood in the doorway, still tear-stained, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She looked at Marco with the unfiltered assessment only children possess, seeing past the expensive suit and the dangerous reputation to something underneath. Is the bad man gone? She asked in a tiny voice. Marco's entire demeanor shifted. The hard edges softened, the dangerous authority replaced by something almost gentle. Yes, sweetheart. He's gone. Is he coming back? No. Marco said it with such absolute certainty that even Elena believed him. He's not coming back, I promise. Sophia studied him for another moment, then walked over and climbed into Elena's lap. She looked at Marco seriously. Are you a good guy or a bad guy? The question hung in the air. Elena watched Marco struggle with how to answer, how to explain to a 4-year-old that the world wasn't that simple, that good men sometimes did bad things, and bad men sometimes wore nice suits. I'm someone who protects people who need protecting, he finally said. Sophia considered this, then nodded, apparently satisfied. Children had a way of cutting through complexity to essential truth. This man felt safe. That was enough. Elena held her daughter tighter, feeling the weight of the moment. She was sitting in her apartment with a man who'd just admitted to being a criminal, whose men had physically intimidated her abuser, who represented a kind of power she didn't understand, and probably shouldn't trust. But Sophia felt safe, and Elena, for the first time in years, felt something other than constant fear. What happens now? She asked. Marco leaned back slightly, giving them space. You have options. I can post men here, make sure Derek doesn't come back. But this apartment isn't secure. The locks are weak, the building has no real security, and if Derek is determined, he'll find a way back in. I can't afford anywhere else. I've been saving, but I have a safe house. Marco cut her off gently. It's clean, secure, fully furnished. You and Sophia can stay there while we handle things. Handle things? Elena's stomach tightened. What does that mean? It means making sure Derek understands that coming near you again would be the last mistake he ever makes. Marco's voice was calm, matter of fact, but the implication was clear. Elena felt sick. She'd wanted Derek gone, wanted him out of her life, but she hadn't wanted, what? What had she wanted? For him to magically become a good person? For the legal system to suddenly start working? For him to simply disappear, without consequences? I can see you're conflicted, Marco observed. You've been taught that accepting help means owing something in return, that men who offer protection expect payment. Elena flinched. He'd read her perfectly. I'm not Derek, Marco continued quietly. I'm not offering protection so I can control you. I'm offering it because no woman should have to barricade herself in her own home while her child hides in a closet. Because restraining orders are worthless when men don't fear consequences. He paused. And because I couldn't save my mother, but I can save you. Sophia yawned against Elena's chest, the adrenaline finally wearing off, leaving only exhaustion. She needed sleep, real sleep, not the half-conscious terror of waiting for Derek's footsteps in the hallway. The safe house, Elena heard herself say. Is it far from here? 20 minutes. Gated property, security cameras. My men rotate shifts. Marco pulled out his phone, showed her photos of a modest but clean townhouse. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, yard for Sophia to play in. You'll have privacy. My men stay outside unless there's a threat. It looked like a dream, like the kind of place Elena used to imagine before Derek had convinced her she didn't deserve dreams. What do you want in return? The question came out harder than she'd intended. Defensive, but she needed to know. Marco met her eyes steadily. Nothing. You owe me nothing. This isn't a transaction, Elena. This is what I do when I have the power to help, and someone needs helping. People don't just do that. There's always a price. You're right. There is a price. Marco stood, preparing to leave. The price is that you let me prove not all men are Derek. That you give yourself and Sophia a chance to feel safe again. That's what I want in return. Your willingness to accept that you deserve better than this. Elena looked around her apartment, at the packed bags that represented months of planning an escape she couldn't afford. At the restraining order that had meant nothing. At Sophia, already half asleep, who'd spent her earliest years learning to hide and stay quiet. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we'll go to the safe house. Marco nodded once. All business again. Pack what you need for a few days. My men will come back tomorrow for the rest. I'll have the apartment watched, make sure nothing's disturbed. He moved toward the door, then paused. Elena, that text you sent tonight, it wasn't a mistake. It was exactly what was supposed to happen. After he left, Elena sat holding Sophia for a long time, trying to understand how her life had just completely changed direction. She'd sent a desperate text to a wrong number, and somehow reached the one man in the entire city who would respond like this. The one man whose personal history made him incapable of walking away from a woman in danger. Maybe it wasn't a wrong number at all. Maybe it was the first right thing that had happened to her in years. The safe house had working locks. Real ones, with deadbolts that actually held, and windows that latched properly. Elena tested them 3 times the first night, her hands shaking as she checked and rechecked, unable to believe they'd actually keep someone out. Sophia explored the townhouse with the cautious wonder of a child who'd learned not to get too comfortable anywhere. She touched the furniture like it might disappear, peeked into closets to make sure they were empty, tested the bed by sitting on the edge before climbing fully onto it. "Mommy, this bed is soft," she whispered, as if speaking too loud might make it vanish. Elena sat beside her daughter, feeling the quality mattress, the clean sheets that didn't smell like mildew and fear. "It is, baby, it's very soft." That first night, Elena didn't sleep. She lay awake listening for Derek's footsteps, for his voice in the hallway, for the sound of locks being picked or windows being forced. Her body had been trained for 4 years to expect violence. One day of safety couldn't undo that conditioning. At 2 a.m., she heard footsteps outside. Her heart stopped. She was halfway to Sophia's room when she heard the radio crackle. North perimeter clear, moving to east side. Marco's men, doing their rotation, protecting, not threatening. Elena sank against the wall, hand pressed to her racing heart, and let herself cry. Not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming strangeness of being safe. Morning came with sunlight through windows that didn't have bars. Sophia woke up without the hypervigilance that usually defined her mornings, without immediately asking if the bad man had come in the night. Marco arrived at 10 a.m., knocking politely and waiting to be invited in. Even that small gesture, waiting for permission to enter, felt foreign to Elena. Derek had never knocked, had never asked, had treated her space as his territory to invade at will. "How was your first night?" Marco asked, staying near the door, giving her space. "Strange," Elena admitted. "I kept waiting for something bad to happen." "That's normal. Your body's been in survival mode for a long time. It takes a while to convince it that it's safe to stand down." He said it like he knew from experience, like he'd lived it himself. "How long?" The question came out smaller than she'd intended. "Depends on the person." "For me?" Marco's smile was sad. "I'm still waiting." Over the next few days, a routine emerged. Marco came by once in the morning, once in the evening, always knocking, always waiting. He brought groceries without being asked, noting what Sophia liked from the cereal she'd chosen the first day. He fixed the dripping faucet in the bathroom without making Elena feel incompetent for not knowing how. He existed in her space, without trying to own it. It was profoundly disorienting. "You keep looking at me like I'm going to hit you," Marco observed one morning, his voice careful. Elena flushed. "I'm sorry, don't apologize. I get it. You've learned that men who provide expect something in return. That kindness comes with conditions." He set down the bag of groceries he'd brought. "I'm not going to suddenly change, Elena. I'm not building up credit to cash in later. This is just what protection looks like when it's real. I don't know how to trust that." "I know. That's why I keep showing up. Eventually, your brain will accept that the pattern isn't changing." The conversations came gradually, in fragments shared over coffee while Sophia played in the yard under the watchful eyes of Marco's men. He told her about his mother, about the years after her death when he'd bounced through foster homes and juvenile detention, about deciding that if the system wouldn't protect people, he'd build his own system that would. Elena told him about the early days with Derek, when the controlling behavior had seemed like devotion. About the first time he'd hit her, and the apology that had convinced her it would never happen again. About the slow erosion of her sense of self, until she'd barely recognized the woman in the mirror. "He told me I was nothing without him," she said quietly one evening, "that no one else would ever want someone as broken as me." Marco's jaw tightened. "Men like Derek convince you you're broken, so you won't realize they're the ones who are. You're not nothing, Elena. You're a woman who survived 4 years of hell, and still managed to protect your daughter. That's not nothing. That's everything." The words settled into cracks in Elena's foundation she hadn't known existed. 1 week in, Elena slept through the night for the first time in years. She woke up disoriented, panicked that she'd missed something, that Derek had gotten in while she was unconscious. But Sophia was still asleep in the next room, and the morning sun was streaming through intact windows, and the only sound was birds, and the quiet murmur of Marco's men changing shifts. She found herself laughing, that afternoon. Sophia had spilled juice all over herself, and instead of the spike of anxiety, Derek would have been furious about the waste, about the mess. Elena just laughed. A real, genuine laugh, that felt like a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. Sophia stared at her in wonder. "Mommy, you sound happy." The observation hit Elena like a physical blow. Her daughter was 4 years old, and surprised to hear her mother laugh. Marco's men became a constant, comforting presence. Carlo, the one who'd pinned Derek to the wall, brought Sophia coloring books. Tommy, who worked the night shift, left fresh coffee for Elena in the mornings. Dominic, Marco's second in command, taught Sophia a complicated handshake that made her giggle. "Boss's orders," Carlo said when Elena tried to thank him. "Anyone threatens you or the kid, they deal with all of us." "Why?" Elena asked. "You don't know us." Carlo exchanged a glance with Tommy. "Boss lost his mom to a man like your ex. We all know what that did to him. If protecting you helps him sleep at night, that's reason enough for us." It wasn't charity, Elena realized. It was healing. For all of them. But the illusion of safety couldn't last forever. 2 weeks into their stay, Marco arrived earlier than usual, his expression grim. "We have a problem." Elena's stomach dropped. "Derek, he's been asking around about you, talking to your old neighbors, your former co-workers. He's not backing down. The restraining order is still just paper," Marco finished. "And he knows it. He also knows you're somewhere under protection, which is making him more determined, not less." Elena sank onto the couch, feeling the familiar dread creeping back in. "So this was temporary. I have to go back eventually, and when I do..." "No." Marco's voice was steel. "You're not going back. We're just adjusting strategy." "What does that mean?" Marco's expression was carefully neutral. "It means Derek needs to understand that the consequences of pursuing you are worse than his desire for control. Permanently." Elena heard the implication. "You're going to hurt him. I'm going to make sure he never hurts you again." "There's a difference." "Is there?" Elena met his eyes. "Because from where I'm sitting, trading one violent man for another isn't actually freedom." The words hung between them, sharp and accusing. Marco flinched like she'd struck him. "You're right," he said quietly. "And that's the difference between Derek and me. You can tell me no. You can set boundaries. You can walk away whenever you want, and I'll make sure you're still protected. Derek never gave you that choice. I will." Elena searched his face, looking for the manipulation she'd learned to expect. But his eyes were clear, honest, in a way that terrified her, because it meant she had to make real choices instead of just surviving. "What are my options?" she asked. "We can increase security here. Make Derek understand through legal channels that pursuing you is a mistake. Or," Marco hesitated, "I can handle it my way, which is faster and more permanent, but crosses lines that can't be uncrossed." "You mean you'll make him disappear?" "I mean I'll ensure he's no longer a threat. How I do that is flexible." Elena looked toward Sophia's room, where her daughter was finally sleeping without nightmares, finally playing without constantly looking over her shoulder. What was she willing to accept to protect that? What lines was she willing to let someone else cross for her safety? "I need time," she said, "to think about this." Marco nodded, standing to leave. "Take all the time you need." "But Elena, Derek's escalating. Time is something we might not have much of." After he left, Elena stood at the window, watching his men patrol the perimeter. Protection that came with a price, even if Marco claimed otherwise. Because accepting his help meant accepting his world, his methods, his version of justice. She'd escaped one prison. She couldn't let herself walk into another, no matter how much safer the bars looked from the inside. The custody papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as he handed them to Elena. She stood in the doorway of the safe house, staring at the legal documents that turned her stomach to ice. Emergency petition for custody. Derek Morrison versus Elena Moretti. Her hands shook as she read Derek's claims, that she'd abandoned their home without notice, that she was living with known criminals, that she'd exposed their daughter to a dangerous environment, that Sophia was at risk in Elena's care. Every word was a knife, twisting in wounds Derek knew intimately, because he'd created them. He was using her escape against her, weaponizing her attempt at safety into evidence of unfitness. Marco found her an hour later, still sitting on the front steps, the papers crumpled in her fists. He didn't ask what was wrong. He simply sat beside her and waited. "He's taking Sophia," Elena finally said, her voice hollow. "He's filed for emergency custody. The hearing is in 3 days." Marco took the papers, his expression darkening with each line he read. "This is bullshit. He's the one with the restraining order against him. which he's claiming I fabricated. He has character witnesses lined up. His boss, his pastor, his landlord, all respectable people who'll testify that he's a devoted father, being kept from his daughter by a mentally unstable woman who's shacking up with the mob. The word mob hung between them, heavy with implication. Elena hadn't said it before, hadn't acknowledged what Marco actually was beyond the vague, complicated reputation they'd danced around. But it was there in the legal papers, spelled out in Derek's accusations. Marco Valentino, known associate of organized crime. Dangerous. Violent. Exactly the kind of man a good mother wouldn't bring around her child. I've made it worse, Elena whispered. By accepting your help, I've given him ammunition. The judge will see these papers, see your name, and decide Sophia's better off with Derek, because at least he's not connected to criminals. Marco was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. There's more you should know. Derek didn't come up with this strategy himself. He's been talking to the Russo family. Elena looked up sharply. Who? Rival organization. They've been looking for an excuse to push back against my territory for months. Derek gave him one. They're helping him with the legal case, providing resources and connections, because if they can make me back down, it shows weakness. So this isn't even about Sophia. It's about you. It's about both. Derek wants control back. The Russos want to test my boundaries. You and Sophia are caught in the middle. Marco's hands clenched into fists. I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this. How could you anticipate that my abusive ex has connections to organized crime? Because men like Derek always have connections. They gravitate toward power structures that protect them. Whether it's the legal system or the criminal underworld. Marco stood abruptly, pacing. The Russos approached me yesterday, told me to back off, that this was a family matter that didn't concern me. What did you say? I told them to go to hell. Elena felt something crack in her chest. Marco, you can't go to war over me. Over us. Whatever's happening between you and this Russo family, it's not worth. You think I'd walk away? Marco turned to face her, and his expression was fierce. You think I'd let them intimidate me into abandoning a woman and child because it's politically inconvenient? I think you have other people depending on you. An organization. Responsibilities. You can't risk all of that for someone you barely know. My mother died because no one thought she was worth the risk, Marco said quietly. Because protecting her was inconvenient. Complicated. Dangerous. I built everything I have so I'd never have to make that calculation again. So I'd never have to choose between safety and doing what's right. Dominic appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Boss, we have a situation. Marco's entire demeanor shifted, authority sliding into place like armor. What kind of situation? The Russos just picked up 2 of our guys on the east side. They're holding them at the warehouse on 5th. Message is clear. Back off the woman or face consequences. Elena felt sick. Men were being threatened because of her. Because Marco had responded to her desperate text message, and now couldn't extract himself without looking weak. Tell them I want a meeting, Marco said. Tonight. Neutral ground. Boss, they're not going to negotiate. This is a power play. Then I'll make them understand the cost of challenging me. Marco's voice was ice. Nobody threatens my people. Not even for territorial politics. After Dominic left, Marco turned back to Elena. I need to handle this. By handle this, you mean violence. I mean establishing boundaries that can't be crossed. People could die. People will definitely die if I show weakness now. Marco's expression was hard. The gentle man who'd brought Sophia coloring books replaced by someone Elena didn't recognize. This is my world, Elena. It's brutal and unforgiving, and once you're in it, there's no neutral ground. Either I protect you completely, or I back off completely. There's no middle option that keeps everyone safe. Elena stood, wrapping her arms around herself. Maybe you should back off. Maybe I should take Sophia and disappear somewhere Derek can't find us. Start over. And leave him free to stalk the next woman. To use his Russo connections to hunt you down anyway? Marco shook his head. Running doesn't work. Trust me, I've seen dozens of women try. Men like Derek always find them. So what then? I just accept that my attempt to escape has triggered a gang war? That's supposed to be better? It's not a gang war. It's a territorial dispute that was going to happen eventually. Derek just gave them an excuse to accelerate their timeline. Marco's voice softened slightly. This isn't your fault, Elena. You didn't create this situation. You just accidentally texted the one man who wouldn't ignore it. A car pulled up outside. More of Marco's men, Elena realized, seeing the tension in their movements, the weapons barely concealed under their jackets. They were preparing for something. For the meeting tonight. For whatever came after. I should have stayed with Derek, Elena heard herself say. At least then, the only person getting hurt would be me. Marco grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. Don't you dare. Don't you dare diminish your life, your safety, your daughter's future, because violent men are being violent. That's not on you. That's on them. But you're risking everything. I'm choosing what to fight for. That's different from having it forced on me. Marco released her, stepping back. 3 months ago, I was going through the motions, building empire for the sake of empire, protecting territory because that's what you do in this life. Then you sent that text, and suddenly I remembered why I built all this in the first place. To protect people who need protecting. To ensure what happened to my mother never happens again if I can prevent it. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. I don't want to be your redemption story. I don't want to be the reason you go to war. You're not. You're the reminder that all this power means nothing if I don't use it for something that matters. Inside the house, Sophia called for her mother. Elena wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself before her daughter saw the breakdown. The custody hearing is in 3 days, she said. What am I supposed to do? Show up with a mafia boss as a character witness? No, you show up with documented evidence of Derek's abuse, testimony from your neighbors about his harassment, and a lawyer who doesn't care about the Russo family's threats. Marco pulled out his phone. I know people, the kind who don't intimidate easily. That will just prove Derek's point, that I'm involved with criminals. It'll prove you're involved with people who have resources. The judge might not like where those resources come from, but Derek's connections to the Russos won't look great either. Once my lawyer starts digging. It was a gamble. Everything was a gamble now. Stay and fight with Marco's help, knowing it pulled her deeper into his world. Run and hope Derek didn't find her, knowing he probably would. Go back and try to appease him, knowing it would never be enough. Mommy. Sophia appeared in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. Are you crying? Elena crouched down, pulling her daughter into a hug. Just a little baby, grown-up stuff. Sophia patted her mother's hair with tiny hands. Is the bad man coming back? I don't know, sweetie. Mr. Marco will stop him. Sophia said it with absolute confidence. The certainty of a child who hadn't yet learned that good guys don't always win. Elena met Marco's eyes over her daughter's head. She saw the weight of that faith, the burden of a 4-year-old's trust in his protection. He'd told her she could walk away any time, that he'd still ensure her safety, even if she rejected his help. But Sophia had already decided. In her child's logic, Marco was the good guy. And good guys protected people from bad men. It was simple, pure, untainted by the complicated reality of his actual life. Yeah, Elena heard herself say. Mr. Marco will stop him. Marco's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by determination. I need to go to this meeting. Dominic will stay here with extra men. You'll be safe. And you. I've survived worse. He left. And Elena watched from the window as his convoy of black SUVs pulled away. Sophia had wandered back to her toys, already distracted, already trusting that the adults would handle the scary things. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a choice without fully understanding the consequences. That by accepting Marco's continued protection, she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Dominic appeared at her shoulder, his voice quiet. He'll come back. He always does. Has he done this before? Risked everything for someone? Not like this. Dominic's expression was thoughtful. Usually the boss is calculated, strategic. But that text you sent hit something personal. Now it's not just business. It's a promise. To me? To himself. To his mother's memory. To every woman who ever needed protection and didn't get it. Dominic glanced at her. You asked him to back off, he'd do it. But it would kill something in him, proving again that power can't actually protect the people who need it most. Elena absorbed this, feeling the weight of it. She wasn't just fighting for herself and Sophia anymore. She'd become part of Marco's war against his own past, his own helplessness, his own failure to save his mother. It should have felt like too much pressure. Instead, it felt like finally having an ally who understood that some battles were worth fighting, even when the odds were impossible. Outside, one of the guards answered his phone, his expression darkening. He spoke briefly, then approached the house. Ma'am. There's been a development. Derek just posted bail for a Russo associate who was arrested last week. They're making this very public, very obvious. What does that mean? It means they're declaring sides, making sure everyone knows Derek has protection too. The guard's jaw tightened. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Elena looked at Sophia, playing innocently with her dolls, and felt the walls closing in. She'd thought escaping Derek would be simple. Pack bags, change locks, start over. She hadn't anticipated that his need for control would metastasize into something larger, more dangerous, involving organizations and territories, and the kind of violence that made restraining orders look like children's drawings. But she also hadn't anticipated Marco, hadn't anticipated that her wrong number would reach someone who understood exactly what she was running from, because he'd lived it too. Someone who had the power to fight back, and the will to use it. The question wasn't whether she trusted Marco. It was whether she was willing to accept the cost of that protection, knowing it came wrapped in danger and moral complexity, and the kind of life she'd never imagined being part of. 3 days until the custody hearing. Hours until Marco's meeting with the Russos. Minutes until Derek's next move in this escalating game. Elena pulled out her phone, staring at Marco's contact information. She could call him, tell him to back off, that she'd handle this alone, that she released him from whatever promise he'd made to himself in that hallway 2 weeks ago. But then Sophia laughed at something her doll had said, and Elena remembered what it was like to hear her daughter laugh without fear underneath it. She put the phone away. Some prices were worth paying, even when you couldn't yet calculate the full cost. The custody hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on Friday. Derek came for Sophia on Thursday night. Elena heard the cars first. Not one, but 3, pulling up outside the safe house with the aggressive rumble of engines meant to intimidate. She was at the window instantly, her heart in her throat, watching as Derek stepped out of the lead vehicle. He wasn't alone. 6 men flanked him, all wearing the kind of expensive casual clothes that said money and muscle. Russo family, Elena realized. They'd sent backup to make sure Marco's men didn't interfere. Dominic! Elena's voice came out strangled. The guard was already moving, phone to his ear, weapon drawn but held low. Boss is 5 minutes out, he said tersely. We hold until he gets here. There are 7 of them and 3 of you. Then we hold smart. Dominic positioned himself between Elena and the door. Get Sophia to the interior bathroom. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you. Elena ran to Sophia's room, scooping up her confused daughter. Another quiet game, baby. Just like before. Is it the bad man? Yes. But we're safe. Mr. Marco's friends are here. She'd just gotten Sophia settled in the windowless bathroom, when Derek's voice boomed through a bullhorn. Elena, I know you're in there. I have a court order for emergency custody. Send Sophia out now, or I'm coming in to get her. Elena's hands shook as she locked the bathroom door. Court order. He'd somehow gotten a judge to sign emergency papers outside of the scheduled hearing. The Russo family's influence, she realized. They'd bought him access, expedited his case, turned the legal system into another weapon. She moved back to the living room, staying away from the windows. Outside she could hear Derek's voice growing louder, more aggressive. The performance was for his Russo backup, proving he was worth their investment, that he could be useful in their campaign against Marco. You can't keep my daughter from me. That's kidnapping. I will call the police. Dominic's laugh was sharp. Please do. We'd love to explain to them how you violated a restraining order, stalked your ex across the city, and allied with known criminals to harass her. One of the Russo men stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of money and connections. We're here to keep this civil. Mr. Morrison just wants his daughter. No one needs to get hurt. Then leave, Dominic countered. Because the only person getting hurt if you stay is Derek. Are you threatening a man exercising his legal parental rights? I'm stating facts. Marco Valentino has declared this woman and child under his protection. You know what that means. The Russo representative smiled, and it was all teeth. We know exactly what it means. Marco's overextending himself for a woman who isn't even family. Makes us wonder what else he's willing to risk for civilians who don't matter to his organization. Elena felt those words like a slap. Civilians who don't matter. That's what she was to them. A pawn in a larger game, valuable only as a pressure point against Marco. Derek was emboldened now, feeding off the Russo family's confidence. Elena, I'm giving you one chance. Send Sophia out, or I'm coming in. Something inside Elena snapped. She'd spent 4 years cowering from that voice, letting it dictate her choices, her movements, her entire existence. She'd let Derek convince her she was nothing, that his anger was her fault, that she deserved every threat and blow. But she wasn't that woman anymore. Elena unlocked the front door. Dominic tried to stop her. Ma'am, the boss said. I'm not hiding from him anymore. Elena stepped outside, and 7 sets of eyes turned to her. She saw Derek's expression shift from aggression, to surprise, to calculation. He'd expected her to cower. They all had. There you are. Derek's voice dripped with false warmth, playing to his audience. Baby, this has gone on long enough. Just give me Sophia, and we can work everything else out. You know I love you. I just want our family back together. No. The word came out stronger than Elena had ever spoken to him. You're not taking her. Derek's mask slipped. I have a court order. You don't have a choice. Show me. He hadn't expected that. He fumbled with papers, pulling out documents that probably were legitimate, bought and paid for by Russo money. Elena scanned them quickly, her hands steadier than she'd thought possible. This says temporary custody pending the hearing. The hearing? That's tomorrow morning. You can't take her tonight. I'm her father. You're an abuser with a restraining order who's violated every condition of his release. Elena's voice grew stronger with each word. You're a coward who threatens women and children, because you can't handle that I'm not afraid of you anymore. Derek's face flushed red. She knew that look, knew exactly how many seconds she had before he exploded. The Russo men tensed, sensing the shift in dynamics. You stupid bitch, Derek snarled, the mask shattering completely. You think hiding behind some gangster makes you brave? You're nothing. You've always been nothing. And when I get Sophia back, I'm going to teach her not to be weak like her. He didn't finish the sentence because Marco's convoy came screaming around the corner, 3 SUVs moving with military precision. They formed a barrier between Derek's group and the safe house, doors opening in synchronized motion, men pouring out with the practiced efficiency of a trained unit. Marco emerged last, and the temperature of the entire confrontation dropped 10 degrees. He took in the scene with cold assessment. Elena standing on the porch, Dominic positioned protectively, Derek and his Russo backup tensed for conflict. Gentlemen, Marco said quietly, you're on my property, threatening people under my protection. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to leave, before this gets very unpleasant. The Russo representative stepped forward. He was older than the others, gray-haired and expensively dressed. Authority radiated from him. Valentino, we're just here to ensure a father's rights are respected. No territorial challenge intended. You brought 7 men to intimidate a woman and child. That's not respecting rights. That's a provocation. Mr. Morrison has legitimate custody concerns. Mr. Morrison has a restraining order and a history of domestic violence. His concerns are irrelevant. Derek found his courage again, buoyed by his backup. You can't keep me from my daughter. I don't care how connected you are, this is. Marco moved so fast, Elena barely saw it. One moment he was 10 feet away, the next he had Derek against the hood of a car, forearm across his throat. You don't get to speak. You don't get to threaten. You don't even get to look at them anymore. Are we clear? The Russo men moved, hands going to weapons. Marco's team mirrored them, the sound of safeties clicking off loud in the night air. The older representative held up a hand, halting the escalation. Valentino, we can't let this pass. You're protecting someone who has no connection to your organization, which makes this personal instead of business. That's a problem. Marco didn't release Derek, but his attention shifted to the Russo representative. Then let me make it business. Elena Moretti and her daughter are under my protection. Anyone who threatens them, threatens me. Anyone who harms them has declared war on my entire organization. Those are the new terms. Over a woman you met 2 weeks ago. Over a principle that apparently needs restating. I will not tolerate violence against women and children in my territory. Ever. For any reason. If the Russo family wants to challenge that, let's do it now, and stop pretending this is about Derek's parental rights. The silence stretched. Elena could see the calculation in the older man's eyes. Was this worth it? Was Derek worth triggering a conflict with Valentino's organization? We have documentation, the representative said finally, of his abuse, his stalking, his threats, all compiled by Mr. Morrison. Substantial evidence for the custody case. Marco smiled, and it was terrifying. Funny. I have documentation, too. He nodded to Dominic, who pulled out a tablet, turning it to face the Russo family. Elena couldn't see the screen from where she stood, but she saw their expressions change as they scrolled through whatever Marco had gathered. That's Derek's bank records, Marco explained conversationally, still holding Derek pinned. Notice the payments to his dealer, the gambling debts, the money he stole from his employer that they never reported because he's the boss's nephew. Derek's face went white. Next page is surveillance footage from the 3 times he broke into Elena's apartment after the restraining order, including the time he waited in her bedroom for 2 hours. You can't use illegally obtained, the Russo representative started. I can provide it anonymously to the police, or to the press, or to Derek's employer, or I can keep it to myself. If Derek agrees to sign away all parental rights and disappear from Elena's life permanently. Marco finally released Derek, who slumped against the car. Your choice. Elena watched Derek's face cycle through emotions. Rage, fear, calculation, desperation. He looked at his Russo backup, silently begging for intervention. But they were already backing away, literal and metaphorical. The older representative shook his head. This isn't what we signed up for, Morrison. You said it was a simple custody dispute. You didn't mention evidence of criminal activity. That's fabricated. He's lying. The timestamp on this footage says otherwise. The representative handed the tablet back to Dominic. We're done here. Morrison, you're on your own. But you promised. We promised to help a father wrongfully separated from his child, not to protect a criminal from consequences. The Russo men were already moving to their cars. Valentino, we'll consider this matter closed. No territorial challenge, no ongoing dispute. Morrison, is not our concern. Derek lunged toward Elena then, desperation overriding sense. You bitch, you've ruined everything. I'll kill you. He didn't get close. Dominic intercepted him with the efficiency of long practice, taking him to the ground hard. Derek struggled, screaming threats, making promises about what he'd do when he got free. Marco crouched beside him, voice low enough that only Derek and those closest could hear. You have two options. Sign the papers terminating your parental rights and leave the state, or I release everything I have to the police. They're very interested in that assault case, from 3 years ago. The one where the victim mysteriously withdrew her complaint. I found her. She's willing to testify now. Derek's struggles stopped. You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove it in court. I just need to make your life here impossible. Your job, your reputation, your freedom, all gone if you don't sign. Marco stood. 24 hours. My lawyer will contact you with the paperwork. Elena expected Derek to fight, to rage and threaten and make impossible promises like he always had. Instead, she saw something she'd never witnessed before. Complete defeat. Derek looked at Marco's men, at the evidence stacked against him, at Elena standing tall instead of cowering, and something in him broke. Fine, he whispered. Fine, I'll sign. Marco nodded once. Dominic, escort Mr. Morrison off the property. Make sure he understands what happens if he changes his mind. As they dragged Derek away, still muttering threats that no longer carried weight, Elena felt her legs give out. She sank onto the porch steps, adrenaline turning to tremors, the reality of what just happened hitting her all at once. Marco sat beside her, careful to maintain distance even now. You were incredible. I was terrified, and that's what made it incredible. You were terrified, and you did it anyway. Marco glanced at her. You didn't hide, didn't wait to be saved. You stepped out and faced him. I had backup. So did he. But his backup left because they saw who you actually are, versus who Derek claimed you were. Marco's voice softened. You're not a victim anymore, Elena. You're a survivor. There's a difference. Inside the house, Elena heard Sophia calling for her. Her daughter had stayed safe through the entire confrontation, protected by locks and walls and Marco's men, but also by Elena's choice to stand between her and Derek instead of cowering. Will he really sign? Elena asked. He'll sign. Men like Derek are cowards at their core. Without the Russo family backing him, without his leverage over you, he's just a small man who hits women to feel powerful. Faced with actual consequences, he'll fold. And the Russo family will remember that protecting women and children is where I draw my line. That's valuable information in our world. Establishes boundaries that everyone can work within. Elena looked at Marco, really looked at him. He'd mobilized an army for her wrong number text, put his organization at risk, faced down a rival family, all for a woman and child he barely knew, because his mother hadn't gotten that protection, because he'd built everything he had on the promise that if he ever had the power to stop men like Derek, he would. Thank you, she said quietly, for all of this, for seeing me as worth protecting. Marco met her eyes. You were always worth protecting, Elena. You just finally had the resources to make it happen. The custody hearing the next morning was anticlimactic. Derek signed the papers terminating his parental rights before the judge even took the bench. His lawyer looked relieved. The Russo family's influence had evaporated overnight, leaving Derek to face the consequences of his actions without a safety net. Elena walked out of the courthouse with full custody, a restraining order that now carried actual weight, and the knowledge that Derek was leaving the state within 48 hours. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the end of a war she'd been fighting so long she didn't know how to exist in peacetime. What happens now? She asked Marco, standing in the courthouse parking lot. Now you decide what you want your life to look like. The safe house is yours, as long as you need it. Or I can help you find a new place, somewhere with actual security. Whatever you choose. And you? Marco smiled, sad and knowing. I go back to my world, check in occasionally, make sure you're okay. Hope that someday you don't flinch when I knock on the door. Elena realized she hadn't flinched in days, hadn't expected violence from Marco's presence, hadn't braced for impact every time he moved. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, her body had learned the difference between protection and control. I'd like you to keep checking in, she said carefully. If that's okay, if it doesn't create problems for you, it would be my honor. Sophia ran up then, having been with one of Marco's trusted men during the hearing. She launched herself at Marco with the fearlessness of children, who'd only ever known him as safe. Did you stop the bad man? she asked, looking up at him with complete trust. Your mom stopped the bad man, Marco corrected gently. I just helped. Sophia considered this, then nodded seriously. Mommy's brave. The bravest, Marco agreed. And watching her daughter in the arms of a man who'd proven that protection didn't have to come with conditions, Elena let herself believe it might be true. 6 months later, Elena stood in front of her own apartment building. Not Marco's safe house, not a temporary refuge, but a place she'd chosen and could afford with her own paycheck. The building had actual security, thanks to Marco's connections with the property owner, but the lease was in her name. The rent came from her salary as a victim advocate at a non-profit Marco had quietly funded but didn't control. It was hers, genuinely, completely hers. Mommy, can Uncle Marco come to my birthday party? Sophia asked, skipping ahead to the entrance. She'd stopped looking over her shoulder months ago, stopped asking if the bad man was coming back. The hypervigilance that had defined her first 4 years had gradually dissolved, replaced by the ordinary concerns of a 5-year-old. Birthday parties, new friends from kindergarten, whether she could have a puppy. I already invited him, baby. He said he wouldn't miss it. Good. Because he promised to teach me that card trick. Elena smiled, watching her daughter punch in the security code with confident fingers. Sophia had no memory of the woman Elena used to be. The one who apologized for existing, who made herself small, who taught her daughter to hide in closets. This version of Elena took up space, spoke her mind, set boundaries without guilt. The transformation hadn't been linear. There were still nights when Elena woke up convinced Derek was in the apartment. Still moments when a man's raised voice sent her spiraling. But the gaps between those moments grew longer. The recovery periods grew shorter. Healing, she'd learned, wasn't a straight line from broken to whole. It was a messy, inconsistent journey, with setbacks and victories measured in tiny increments. Like the first time she'd gone a whole week without checking the locks obsessively. Or the morning she'd realized she'd laughed more in a single day than in the entire previous year. Or the evening Marco had knocked, and she'd opened the door without her heart rate spiking. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dominic, boss running late, meeting went long, says to start without him. Elena smiled. Marco's men had become fixtures in her life. Not as guards anymore, but as friends. Carlo had helped her move into this apartment, refusing payment, and staying to build Sophia's bookshelf. Tommy brought coffee every Thursday morning before her support group meetings. Dominic had taught her basic self-defense, patient and professional, never making her feel weak for flinching at sudden movements. They were family now. The kind you chose, instead of being born into. Elena, her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, waved from across the hall. My niece is interested in your self-defense class. Can I give her your number? Of course. Next session starts Tuesday evening. The class had been Marco's idea, offered cautiously over coffee 3 months ago. You have knowledge other women need, experience that could save lives. If you ever wanted to share it. Elena had started small. 6 women in a community center basement, teaching them the basics Dominic had taught her. How to break holds, where to hit to disable an attacker, but more importantly, how to trust their instincts, how to recognize red flags, how to leave before it got worse. The class had grown. 15 women now, then 20. Survivors teaching survivors, creating a network of support that no restraining order could provide. Elena had found purpose in the wreckage of her past, transforming trauma into power, fear into strength. Inside her apartment, Elena found Sophia arranging stuffed animals for an elaborate tea party. The living room was bright, decorated with artwork Sophia had created in her kindergarten class. Photos on the wall, Elena and Sophia at the park, Marco teaching Sophia to ride a bike, the whole found family at Carlo's daughter's graduation. No photos of Derek. He'd signed the papers, left the state, and disappeared from their lives completely. The restraining order had been made permanent, but they hadn't needed it. Sometimes, Elena allowed herself to wonder if he'd found peace somewhere, if he'd gotten help, if he'd changed. But mostly she didn't think about him at all. He'd lost the power to occupy her thoughts. Her phone rang. Marco's name on the screen, accompanied by the photo Sophia had insisted on taking. Marco making a silly face while holding a trophy Sophia had won at her school's field day. Hey, Elena answered, feeling the warmth that came with chosen family. Dominic said you're running late. Yeah, sorry. Situation at one of the restaurants. Should be there in 30 minutes. A pause. Is that okay? I know Sophia's been excited all week. The fact that he asked, that he made sure she was comfortable with his presence even after 6 months of proving himself trustworthy, said everything about who Marco was. He'd never stopped treating her autonomy as sacred, never assumed his protection entitled him to her time or space. It's more than okay. We're not starting without you anyway. Sophia would mutiny. Marco's laugh was genuine, the sound of someone who'd found connection after years of isolation. Can't have that. Mutinies are bad for business. How's the restaurant situation? Resolved. Manager was skimming, Thought he could hide it. He was wrong. Marco's voice carried satisfaction, but not cruelty. He's fired. Workers are getting back pay, and I'm implementing better oversight. Your influence is showing, by the way. 2 years ago, I would have just had him disappeared. Now I'm focused on making things right for the employees first. Elena felt a swell of something complicated. Pride mixed with awareness that she'd helped reshape how a powerful man used his power. Not by changing his nature, but by reminding him why he'd built his empire in the first place. That's growth, she said. That's you and Sophia, showing me what actually matters. Another pause. I should let you go. Get ready for the party. But Elena, thank you. For what? For sending that text. For trusting me when you had no reason to. For letting me prove that protection doesn't have to come with conditions. His voice softened. For becoming family. After hanging up, Elena stood at her window, looking out at the city where 6 months ago she'd been barricaded in a different apartment, terrified and desperate. That text to the wrong number had changed everything. Had connected two people who needed each other, in ways neither had understood at first. Marco had needed to prove he could save someone, could use his power for protection, instead of just control. Elena had needed to learn that not all men wielded power as a weapon, that safety could exist without strings attached. Together, they'd created something neither could have built alone. A found family forged in crisis, but sustained by choice. Mommy, when's Uncle Marco getting here? Sophia called from her bedroom. Soon, baby, very soon. Elena returned to party preparations, hanging streamers Sophia had picked out, purple and silver, her current favorite colors. The apartment filled with the sounds of ordinary happiness, a child singing off-key, neighbors chatting in the hallway, the distant hum of city life no longer threatening but simply background noise. When Marco arrived 30 minutes later, Sophia launched herself at him with a squeal of joy. He caught her easily, spinning her around while she laughed. The fearsome Mafia Boss transformed into a devoted uncle who'd probably spent too much money on birthday presents and wouldn't apologize for it. Carlo and Dominic arrived shortly after, along with a few other members of Marco's inner circle who'd become fixtures at family gatherings. Mrs. Chen brought her niece, who looked at Elena with the cautious hope of someone seeking a lifeline. 2 women from Elena's support group came, bringing their kids to play with Sophia. The apartment overflowed with people who'd found each other through unconventional circumstances, and decided that blood wasn't the only thing that made family. As the party wound down and Sophia fell asleep surrounded by new toys, Elena found Marco on her small balcony, looking out at the city lights. Thank you for coming, she said, joining him. It meant everything to her. To both of us. Wouldn't have missed it. Marco glanced at her. You've built something remarkable here, you know. This life. This community. 6 months ago, you were barely surviving. Now you're thriving. 6 months ago, I sent a desperate text to a wrong number. Best wrong number I ever received. Marco smiled. Though I'm starting to think it wasn't wrong at all. Just destiny disguised as a mistake. Elena considered this. The odds of her transposing those specific digits. Of reaching Marco's private phone. Of him being someone whose past made him incapable of ignoring her plea. Of Derek's escalation forcing a confrontation that reset boundaries for everyone involved. Maybe there are no wrong numbers, she said. Just messages that find exactly who needs to receive them. I like that theory. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city that had witnessed their transformation. Elena thought about the woman she'd been. Terrified. Convinced she was broken beyond repair. Certain no one would ever see her as worth saving. Then she thought about the woman she was becoming. Strong enough to stand her ground, brave enough to accept help, whole enough to offer that same help to others. I'm teaching a new class next month, Elena said. For teenagers. How to recognize abuse early. Before it becomes what I survived. Marco, some of these kids are already living it. 14, 15 years old, trapped in relationships that are destroying them. What do you need? Funding for more sessions, space at the community center, maybe connections to school counselors who can refer students. She paused. And I want to create a safe house network, not just one location, but multiple places where women can go immediately, without waiting for beds at shelters that don't exist. Marco turned to face her fully. You're building an empire of your own. I'm building what I needed and didn't have. What your mother needed. What every woman trapped in violence needs. Options, resources, and people who won't look away. I'll fund it all. Whatever you need, however you want to structure it. Marco's expression was serious. This is exactly what I wanted my resources used for. Real change, real protection. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears this time. Tears of gratitude, purpose, connection. We make a good team. The best. Wrong number buddies saving the world one survivor at a time. Inside, Sophia stirred, calling sleepily for her mother. Elena excused herself, tucking her daughter into bed, smoothing hair from her forehead, marveling at the peace on that small face. No nightmares tonight. Maybe no nightmares ever again. When she returned to the balcony, Marco was preparing to leave, giving her space as he always did. But Elena found herself not wanting him to go, not wanting to be alone in her hard-won independence, wanting instead the company of someone who understood both where she'd been and where she was going. Stay, she said, for coffee, to celebrate Sophia's birthday properly, to plan this safe house network. She smiled, to be family, which is what you are now. Marco's expression softened into genuine warmth. I'd like that. They moved inside, leaving the balcony door open to let in the night air. Over coffee and leftover birthday cake, they planned futures for women they'd never met, built safety nets for survivors who didn't yet know they needed catching, created the kind of protection network that might have saved Marco's mother if it had existed decades earlier. It wasn't romance, though outsiders sometimes assumed it was. It was something deeper, more permanent. Two people who'd found each other in crisis and decided to build something meaningful from the wreckage. Family forged by choice, strengthened by shared purpose, sustained by mutual respect and understanding. Elena's phone sat on the table between them, silent now. That wrong number that had changed everything. That desperate plea that had reached exactly the right person, at exactly the right moment. Do you ever think about it? Marco asked, following her gaze. What would have happened if you'd typed the number correctly? If you'd reached the actual hotline instead of me? Elena considered. They would have helped. Eventually. Within their limitations. But Derek would have kept coming. The Russo family would have kept backing him. The legal system would have kept failing me. She met Marco's eyes. I don't think I'd be sitting here right now. I think I'd still be running, or hiding, or worse. Or you would have found another way. You're stronger than you know. Maybe. But I wouldn't have found this. She gestured at the apartment. The evidence of the life they'd built together. A family that chose each other. A purpose that heals, while it protects. A future I actually want to live in. Marco raised his coffee cup. To wrong numbers that turn out right. Elena clinked her cup against his. To messages that find who needs them most. To families built on choice instead of obligation. To using power for protection instead of control. To second chances and new beginnings. They drank, and in that moment, Elena felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't Derek's victim anymore. Wasn't defined by what had been done to her, or what she'd survived. She was simply Elena, survivor, advocate, mother, friend. Part of a found family that proved angels sometimes wore expensive suits and arrived at your door because you'd accidentally texted them asking for help. 6 months. From a wrong number to a right life. From terror to safety. From isolation to family. From barely surviving to genuinely thriving. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos. Crimes being committed, lives being destroyed, women barricading doors against men who wouldn't take no for an answer. But somewhere in that darkness, Elena's network was growing. Women teaching women. Survivors protecting survivors. Safe houses opening. Resources flowing to those who needed them most. All because one desperate woman had transposed 2 digits, and reached someone who understood exactly what it meant to be powerless against violence. Someone who'd built an empire on the promise to never let that powerlessness win again. Same time next week? Marco asked as he prepared to leave. Our standing coffee date to save the world. Wouldn't miss it. Bring the contractor estimates for the new safe house locations. I want to have at least 3 operational by fall. You're ambitious. I like it. After Marco left, Elena stood at her window one more time. Phone in hand. She pulled up their text thread, scrolling back to that first message 6 months ago. Help. He's coming. Please. I need help now. And Marco's response. Where are you? 2 words that had changed everything. That had proven sometimes the universe sent help from the most unexpected sources. That had connected 2 broken people who'd found wholeness in protecting others from the same pain they'd survived. Elena typed a new message. Thank you for answering. For everything. For becoming family. The response came immediately. Thank you for giving me a reason to use this power for something that matters. Sleep well, Elena. You and Sophia are safe. Always. She put the phone down, checked Sophia's room one last time and climbed into her own bed in her own apartment in her own life. No fear tonight. No checking locks obsessively. No bracing for violence that wasn't coming. Just peace. Hard won. Carefully built. Fiercely protected peace. And the knowledge that if danger ever came again, she had a family who would answer. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. Because that's what family did. Wrong numbers, Elena thought as she drifted off to sleep, sometimes led to exactly the right destinations. The end. Healing isn't linear. Families aren't always found in blood. And sometimes, the scariest looking angels arrive exactly when you need them most. All because of a message sent in desperation to a number you thought was wrong. But maybe there are no wrong numbers. Maybe there are just connections waiting to be made, families waiting to be formed, and second chances disguised as mistakes. Sometimes, asking for help reaches exactly who needs to hear it. And sometimes, answering that call saves more than one life. This is the story of a wrong number that became the right everything.